Hello. The Divine Code reading for September 7th, pages 183 and 184. We're in the chapter on forbidden statues, images, and pillars. Continuing in topic number 3. The only type of non-idolatrous statue that is prohibited to be made as a decoration is one with accurate three-dimensional features of a frontal human form. That is a head together with a complete body, even if it is only the front, if only the front protrudes. So what's considered here is a statue that is not for idol worship. It's for decoration or for some other purpose. And it has a three-dimensional form of the human, either as a relief coming out from the material, or as a standing or as a standalone statue, as a complete statue. It can either be, it can be the front of, it can be the whole person, it can be the torso and head, or it can just be the head of the person. Any of these would count as a prohibited, non-idolatrous statue. Included in this are, 1, forms of human-like angels. For example, with wings protruded from the back of a human body, and mythological or other imaginary beings with minor non-human features added to the human body, such as Medusa, that has snakes in place of the hair of the body, which is a slight change that retains the general human form. So something like an angel, which has wings coming out of its back, or Medusa with the snakes for the hair, that's considered a minor change from a human form. However, if significant change is made which clearly indicates the statue as non-human, it seems it is not forbidden to make it for decoration. For example, this applies if the statue is a human above the waist and an animal or fish, such as a mermaid, below the waist, or if the animal's head or some other object is added alongside the human head. So a major change, like the even if the head is there, and the head by itself would be considered as a prohibited if it's with a fish head next to it, or if it's got the body of a fish or something like that, something that makes it no longer in the category of possibly being considered human. I guess the question here is whether or not it can be considered basically a human with some modifications, or is it a totally different species, would seem to be the issue here. The Torah's prohibition specifies in Exodus 20, verse 20, "Do not make the forms that are with me," meaning forms of humans or angels who are servants and messengers of God. This is clear from Shach Yeridea 141, 20, and 21. But semi-human forms are not included in this prohibition, other than the multi-faced angel images that are described below, since those are ministering angels that are also with me. So when God says, what is with me? He's talking about humans, he's talking about angels, he's talking about other heavenly beings that are described as being under the category of with me. Therefore, a statue of a complete human body with an animal body and hind legs protruding from the back of the human form is forbidden to be made, because this includes a full human form and the animal part is secondary. So if it is human, the statue is human, but there's some, in this case, the whole front of the person is human, and behind it extends out as an animal. That would still be considered as recognizable as human. Even according to Rambam's logic that the Torah forbids making forms lest least people come to worship them, one can understand there is a logical argument for prohibiting forms of semi-human creatures that are famous from cultural mythologies. It is nevertheless obvious that there are limits to this prohibition, and not every form is forbidden to make. The precept itself only forbids human or angelic forms. The size of the form is irrelevant. So the Torah prohibition, what the Bible says, is that we're not to make forms that are like with what we associate as being with God. The forms that are part of the ministering, what is described in the Bible as being around God. If we have something from a cultural myth, Paul Bunyan had a bull. If you made the bull, it's a cultural myth. That would not necessarily be in this prohibition because it's part of a cultural myth. But if the bull was seen as part of a heavenly host, then it would be prohibited. If a toy figure or doll has an anatomically correct human form, we consider two types: collector's pieces that are valued as adults, which might be displayed for decorations. These can be made permissible by removing a feature, for example, by cutting off an ear. See topic 7 below regarding deformation of forms to make them permissible. 2. Toys for children's play, which are permitted as they are, since they are not intended for decorative purposes. See topic 8 below. But if the toy's features are not accurate, the toy is permitted from the onset. So if you have a toy, a person's playing with a G.I. Joe. The G.I. Joe looks like human. If it was a collector's piece, or if a person has made a G.I. Joe to put in the park, that would be considered a prohibited non-idolatrous image. If it's being used for decoration, it can be nullified of that by doing something that will be described in topic 9 of this chapter, of how to sort of deform it so that it's acceptable. If the G.I. Joe is a toy, being used as a toy, and it's just a child plaything, it would not be necessary to nullify it. A question came up for myself concerning the elf on a shelf. No, I'm sorry, not the elf, the other one. A mensch on a bench. A mensch on a bench, does it represent a human form? Is it proper proportions? Well, it is kind of sort of proper proportions. It's a little comical, but it's proper proportions. The mensch on a bench, if it's being used for decorative purposes, then it would be necessary to do some sort of nullification so it's not seen as potentially idolatrous, as a prohibited non-idolatrous image. If it's being used as a child's plaything, which is sort of what it was designed for, then it would not be considered a potentially idolatrous image. But if a child's plaything or a decorative statue was silly enough, maybe more so than the mensch on the bench, if it was beyond anything that would be considered, this we would recognize as human, it's, you know, like a Picasso painting or something, then it would not be a concern. Therefore, one may not carve or form a three-dimensional protruding human form, the head with the body, for decoration in wood, plaster, stone, or metal, etc. So that's making an image in any of these forms, in any of these material. The only thing prohibited by this precept is a human form. For example, sculptures that are sometimes made to decorate the interior or exterior of a building or the like. So somebody has a decorative image that they put in front of their building, in a lobby of a hotel, in a park. You have a decorative image. It should be nullified in some manner, as will be described in a later part of this chapter. Rambam, the laws of the worship of stars and idols, 3:10. In regard to Gentiles, Rambam writes in the Laws of Kings 9:2 that they are not allowed to set up a pillar, plant an Asherah tree, a tree connected with idol worship, or make a full frontal human statue with accurate features for decoration. This means that all prohibitions of idol worship apply to Gentiles as well, including even these three things, and things similar to them, which are not themselves actual idol worship, but which may cause others to err and serve idols. Namely, these three things: one, pillars that were used by Hebrew patriarchs for the service of God, which are now forbidden since they may come to be used by other nations to mark gathering places for idol worship. So a pillar is like what we have today, a grave marker. A person marks a grave with a stone in order to know that there's a grave there. And this is particularly important for the Jewish priestly group, that they're not to step on a grave, and so therefore it's allowed that there be grave markers. Other similar things may be a village puts a stone up marking some historic event that might lead to a thing where people say, okay, we're going to go to this place that, you know, we're doing a religious ritual. Where should we do it? Oh, we'll do it in the park by the stone. Therefore, the stone is not to be set up in that way. An Asherah tree, which is not an idol itself, an idol at all, but only a decoration for the place of idols worship, as Rambam writes, Deuteronomy 16:21 and 22, that it was planted by the doorstep of a house of idol worship to draw masses of worshipers. So an Asherah tree is similar to a stone. The difference is that Asherah tree is a tree. It's also used as a marking place. It can also be used as a decoration. There's some opinions that it can be used as an idol, but at this point, we're not talking about actual idols. We're talking about other objects. So in these three categories, the objects that are prohibited, even if they're not idolatrous. So yeah, the pillar is not considered an idol, but it's considered prohibited because it can be used as a meeting place. The Asherah tree can either be used as a meeting place, or it can be used in some significance in the idol worship. Therefore, that would be prohibited. And the third one is the full three-dimensional decorative human forms, and that's what we're talking about in this topic here, which others may come to worship as idols, as explained by Rambam in the Laws of the Worship of Stars and Idols, etc. That would be 3:10. It is also the opinion of Miri on Tractate Sanhedrin 56, So the concern is that in all three of these areas is that it can draw people. These things can draw people. So let's say we had a special tree. The town had a special tree. It was not a tree that existed before the town, or it was natural, and then later on they decided to treat it with honor, but rather it's a tree that was planted for the purpose of honor. It was planted with that intent. That would be prohibited, because it can become a place where the community comes together for idol worship. And the statues, as absurd as it might sound, there might be a statue of a war hero in a park, and over time it can draw people to idol worship. Topic number 4. It is permitted to make non-idolatrous decorative human images that are engraved or painted. For example, portraits that are painted even on wood or stone, woven or embroidered, such as tapestry, is even permitted to make a three-dimensional partial human form. What is prohibited for this purpose? A three-dimensional human form that includes the head with the entire body, with all the limbs in nominally proper proportions, whether it is a complete head and body, front and back, or only the front half. Therefore, the Rambam, The Laws of the Stars of Worship and Idols, 3:10 states, when the image is protruding, for example, images and sculptures that decorate the walls of a hallway and the like. These are obviously sculptured on one side only, and with their backside connected to the wall. So at this point here, we're being told that what's prohibited is the according to the Bible, the biblical prohibition is having something that protrudes outward. The body. It can be if you have a wall and the statue kind of comes out from it. That's considered to be what's prohibited to make. If it's a painting on the wall, or it's a painting on some other surface, that's not part of the prohibition. That's not the biblical prohibition. And if it's engraved, that means it's sculpted inward, not outward, but inward. That would not fall in the biblical prohibition. Both these things can still be considered improper. And there are people that are extra strict in this area to say that it's improper. But according to what the Bible is saying is that it refers to statues or things that protrude out. So if you have a cup and the cup has images that protrude out, that would be the type that it's talking about here. Therefore, it is permitted to make non-idolatrous decorative human forms that are just a complete head or a complete body without a head, or a human body in profile. So if it's apparently it is okay for just a complete head. Now a bust, which normally includes the shoulders, I'm not sure how that would count, because normally they don't make just a complete head, they make it with the shoulders. But clearly if it's just a complete head without any body, that would be permitted from what it's saying here. But if it's a complete body without a head, and that's Shach Yeridea, Shulkin O'Rourke, Uridea 141.7, and Schock 141 and 20 and 25. So it can be a complete body without the head, or it can be the profile. Because what they're concerned about is there's things where the person gazes upon. When they're gazing upon, it's like they're looking at the reflection. They're gazing upon it in a meditative manner, and that doesn't work the same way if it's in profile. If the image is in profile, then the person's not going to be staring directly into it, which is where it becomes sort of an idolatrous. It becomes an area of gazing. The person gazes directly into another person. They don't gaze at an angle. If one leaves something missing from the human image, for example, he cuts off the tip of the nose or the earlobe, or takes out one of its eyes, or if he omits a feature in the first place, is permitted. It's going to discuss this more in a few pages, where in a couple of days, when it's going to discuss nullification of idols. At this point, the important part is that he omits, if he's making a statue and he omits an important part, and therefore it's no longer recognizable as a proper human form, then it would be a permitted image, a permitted statue. Thank you.